The burning of HMS Gaspee. By 1772, Rhode Island had already gained a reputation as a troublesome colony. Its merchants were fiercely independent, resistant to British control, and deeply involved in a lucrative trade network that operated with flexible interpretations of customs laws. The Crown wanted revenue. The colonists wanted freedom. And in the waters of Narragansett Bay, the two desires collided. Welcome to Historic Crimes TV, where you get the true story of events that have happened in the past which helped shape the history of the world that we are living in. Before we begin, please click the subscribe button below so you will get more from us. Now relax and enjoy. The Bay of Clashing Wills, Narragansett Bay breathed with its usual morning rhythm, gulls calling, sails snapping in the breeze, and the smell of salt rolling over the docks of Providence. Merchants bustled along the wharves, shouting prices, loading crates, arguing over debts. Beneath the noise, however, there pulsed a quiet hostility, a tension between Rhode Island's fiercely independent people and the British officials determined to control them. Among the most hated instruments of that control was the HMS Gaspee, a sleek customs schooner under the command of Lieutenant William Duddingston, a man who believed strictness was virtue and mercy was weakness. To Rhode Island merchants, he was the embodiment of harassment, stopping vessels without cause, seizing cargo on mere suspicion, boarding even local fishermen's skiffs under the accusation of smuggling. In the taverns, sailors complained that Gaspee turned the bay into a British trap. Politicians whispered that Duddingston exceeded his authority. Merchants murmured that something must be done. Though no one dared to say it aloud, it hovered over the colony like a growing storm. One day, someone will stop that ship. June 9th, the chase begins. Just before noon on June 9th, 1772, Captain Benjamin Lindsay guided his merchant sloop Hannah down the bay. He knew Gaspee lurked nearby, hunting for violators of the Navigation Acts. He kept his eyes on the water and his temper tight. Suddenly the cry rose from Hannah's deck, "British schooner to stern." The feared vessel approached with predatory precision. Lindsay clenched his jaw. He had been boarded twice in the same month, his crew questioned, his cargo rifled through. Not today. Lindsay turned sharply toward the western shore, steering dangerously close to shallow water. His crew gasped as Hannah skimmed past hidden sandbars. No British officer would dare follow so recklessly, he thought. But Lieutenant Duddingston was no ordinary officer. Seeing his prey swerve, he roared, "After her! Full sail, keep her in sight!" The Gaspee surged forward, pursuing Hannah into perilous waters, and then it happened. A violent shudder. A grinding scream of timber on sand. HMS Gaspee slammed into a reef and stuck fast. The tide was receding, dusk was falling, the schooner was trapped. Lindsay looked back once, a sly smile on his face, and continued to Providence, where he immediately delivered the news. The colony did not sleep that night. The meeting at Sabin Tavern. The Sabin Tavern's windows glowed like fiery eyes in the night. Inside, men gathered: merchants, sailors, farmers, even a few political leaders. Among them stood the formidable John Brown, a man known as much for his wealth as his willingness to defy British authority. Voices clashed like waves: "Gaspee has tormented us long enough. They'll never catch them if we act fast. The tide won't rise until morning, this is our chance." Brown stood upon a chair, lifting his hand for silence. His voice carried command: "Gentlemen, the Gaspee lies helpless. Tonight we rid ourselves of her." A hush fell. In that moment, the decision of rebellion solidified. Men stepped forward, agreeing to join. Their names would never be recorded, but their courage would echo through history. Boats were quietly prepared, weapons distributed, faces blackened with soot for disguise. At midnight, more than 50 men pushed their longboats into the black water, oars whispering like conspirators. The night had chosen its soldiers. Approach of the rebels. The moon hung low, dimmed by clouds, as the raiding boats glided across Narragansett Bay. Silence ruled. Every splash of oars felt like a heartbeat. The stranded Gaspee loomed ahead, its form dark against the horizon. Lieutenant Duddingston, still aboard despite the schooner's predicament, paced the quarterdeck. His anger simmered, his ship was trapped, his authority mocked. When he spotted shapes moving across the water, he called out, "Who comes there? Identify yourselves." No reply. The boats drew closer. "Stay off. This is His Majesty's schooner Gaspee." Still silence. Duddingston shouted again, hand gripping his pistol. At last, a single voice rose from the boats, sharp, defiant. "We want your damned ship, sir." A musket fired, chaos exploded. Gunfire in the dark, shots cracked across the water, shouts echoed. Men swarmed up the sides of the Gaspee, forcing their way aboard. Duddingston fired his pistol, but before he could reload, a musket shot tore into his thigh, sending him collapsing to the deck. His crew, shocked and leaderless, offered only brief resistance before surrendering. The colonists treated Duddingston's wounds, not out of affection, but out of principle. They were rebels, not murderers. With the sailors removed and guarded, the raiders turned to the task that had brought them here. They stripped the vessel of its useful supplies. Then, without hesitation, they broke open barrels of tar and set them ablaze. Fire embraced the schooner greedily. The mast lit like a torch. Flames roared along the deck, consuming the ship that had haunted Rhode Island for months. At 3 a.m., the flames reached the powder magazine. An explosion ripped the night sky apart. HMS Gaspee ceased to exist and the American Revolution stepped one stride closer. Did you support them burning the ship? The silence of a colony. By dawn, smoke drifted across the bay like the ghost of a British law undone. The news traveled quickly, first whispers, then bold declarations. The Gaspee has burned. London was furious. A royal commission formed. Investigators sailed to Rhode Island, demanding names, demanding justice. But Rhode Island had already made a pact of silence. Merchants claimed they were asleep. Sailors said they saw nothing. Officials shrugged, feigning ignorance. Even those who knew exactly who had rode into the night refused to speak. Not one colonist betrayed another. Despite threats, bribes, interrogations, and surveillance, no arrests were ever made. A spark before the storm, the burning of HMS Gaspee did more than destroy a schooner. It awakened the colonies. It proved they were willing to act not only with words but with fire. This act of defiance came a year before the Boston Tea Party, years before Lexington and Concord. Yet it contained the same spirit: we will not submit to tyranny. The Gaspee had been burned, but more importantly, something had been ignited. A sense of unity, a willingness to resist, a fire that would sweep through 13 colonies and forge a new nation. The night the Gaspee burned, the first flames of revolution lit the American horizon. The shockwaves reached London. When word of the Gaspee's destruction reached London, it traveled like a spark leaping from dry leaf to dry leaf. British officials read the first reports in stunned disbelief. A king's naval vessel, burned by colonists, not in open war, but in peacetime? It was unprecedented. Letters flew across desks at the Admiralty, reports were hurried to King George III himself. Colonial rebellion was no longer a theoretical fear. The discussions in Parliament grew heated. This was no mere riot, this was treason. Rhode Island has grown lawless. American insolence must be crushed before it spreads. The conclusion was unanimous: someone had to be punished, or the colonies would believe Britain was weak. London authorized a special investigative body with an intimidating mandate: hunt down the perpetrators and transport them to England for trial. This last provision horrified the colonies. To them, being dragged across the ocean for trial was tyranny itself. The Gaspee affair was no longer local. It was imperial. The commissioners arrive. In early 1773, winter ice still clung to Narragansett Bay when the British Investigative Commission arrived. These were no ordinary officials, they were some of the most powerful figures in the colonies: Governor Joseph Wanton of Rhode Island, Governor Thomas Hutchinson of Massachusetts, Governor Frederick Smith of New Jersey, Chief Justice Peter Oliver and Admiral John Montagu, commander of the British Navy in North America. Their presence made it clear, Britain meant business. The commission held its proceedings at Newport. Their goal was simple: name the men who burned the Gaspee. But the colonists thwarted them from the very first day. Witnesses came forward, but every single one knew nothing. Sailors swore they were home asleep. Merchants claimed they saw nothing suspicious. Fishermen suddenly became forgetful. Even tavern keepers, who knew everyone's business, shrugged blankly. The commissioners pressed harder. Admiral Montague thundered that he already knew the culprit, John Brown, the wealthy merchant leader. But even Montague's accusations failed. No one betrayed Brown. Not even his rivals. The commission was running into a wall, the united silence of a colony. Governor Wanton's quiet defiance. Governor Joseph Wanton found himself in a strange position. As a royal governor, he was expected to assist the inquiry. But as a Rhode Island native, he understood the anger that had fueled the raid. Officially, Wanton cooperated. Unofficially, he undermined the investigation at every turn. He questioned witnesses with deliberate vagueness. He misfiled documents. He dragged out proceedings. He pressed for leniency. He insisted that the colonists' actions were provoked by British misconduct. Behind closed doors, he even hinted to British officers that the investigation was hopeless. The people will not turn on one another, not for you, nor for me, nor for the crown. The commission grew increasingly frustrated. Months passed, testimonies remained empty, Rhode Island remained silent. When spring arrived, the commissioners finally admitted the truth: they would never identify the attackers. Dismissal and victory. By June 1773, almost a full year after the burning of the Gaspee, the commission quietly disbanded and returned to their colonies. They had no names, no arrests, no convictions, not even a credible suspect. The British crown was humiliated. Rhode Island, on the other hand, celebrated quietly but triumphantly. This was more than just escaping punishment, it was a psychological victory. For the first time, colonists had openly defied Britain, and gotten away with it. The message spread across the colonies. Boston watched with interest, New York newspapers retold the event with admiration, Virginia's revolutionaries discussed it in taverns. The Gaspee affair became a symbol: rebellion can succeed if the people stand united. This lesson would become essential in the years to come. The road toward revolution, though the Gaspee's flames had been extinguished, the fire it lit in the colonies only grew. The aftermath set several revolutionary forces in motion. 1. Committees of correspondence. The threat of colonists being shipped overseas for trial terrified Americans. This fear helped ignite the creation of committees of correspondence, secret communication networks between colonies. The Gaspee affair became one of the first crises these committees discussed. 2. Colonial unity. Before 1772, each colony acted mostly alone. But the shared outrage over the commission and the threat of extradition helped unite them. The colonies became more coordinated, more vocal, and more resistant. 3. Legal resistance. Colonial leaders argued that transporting Americans overseas for trial was illegal. This debate sharpened political awareness and strengthened opposition to British authority. 4. A precursor to the Tea Party. Just 18 months later, Boston radicals, emboldened by the Gaspee example, boarded British ships and dumped tea into the harbor. Many in New England whispered, they learned from Rhode Island. 5. The coming storm. When the first shots of the Revolution rang out at Lexington and Concord, some old Rhode Island raiders stood on the fields, older, perhaps, but still defiant. They had struck the crown once before and they were ready to strike again. The forgotten spark. Today, the burning of HMS Gaspee is less famous than the Boston Tea Party, yet it was the first major act of violent American resistance to British rule. Long before the Declaration of Independence, long before the First Continental Congress, long before the world knew men like Washington or Jefferson, ordinary Rhode Islanders lit the flame of rebellion on a dark night in June by burning a schooner that symbolized oppression. The revolution did not begin with a musket shot. It began with fire. Unity is power. It makes the weak look strong even when the enemy is powerful. Please like and subscribe to motivate us to post more videos.